In this video, I'll go through the process of creating the rocket pack, fire, and smoke from the Rocket-Dee video using Particular in After Effects.
Okay, so I've created a new scene called Example Particles 2, and this is where we'll do the rocket engine. I'm just going to grab one of these adjustment layers from here. Oh, that one's too big. We need one that's HD size. Here we go. I'll just grab that one. Adjustment layer, and then I just want a solid that is also HD size, instead of creating a million new ones, which I've already done. And let's just create the Trapcode Particular. There we go. Okay, so we have particles moving in the scene, which is great. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'm just going to add a camera really quick. Camera, and I'm going to make it 50 millimeters. There we go. Go into the camera view. Okay, so we now are looking at these particles. I'm going to put them down to third, just so I can keep things moving quickly. Okay, so what I did with this was actually, with the rocket pack, is I actually made the particles follow a light, an animated light. So what we'll do here is I'm just going to create a new light. It'll be a point light. Intensity, we'll put it at 100 for now. And cast shadows, we don't really need that for now. I'll just put that in here. And now if I want this emitter to track to light, I can go to lights, and what it'll tell you is you need to name the light with emitter in the front, okay? So it won't do anything. The emitter won't do anything until I attach the name emitter to it. So I can put emitter light 1. Now what should happen is that now the particles will emit from the light. Now what I'll do really quickly is just animate the light moving around. The cool thing about this is that you can actually attach this light then to another object, like what I did with the Rocket-Dee, is I actually attached it to the character, and just by parenting it to it, so then it followed him around perfectly. And just put these to rove across time so it's sort of consistent. So now what you'll see is that this is actually following a path. And let's speed this up a little bit. 5 seconds long, and okay, so now it's following that path. The next thing I want to do is actually change the emission. Now I believe the particles per second modifier is coming from the light intensity. You can put that to none and it'll just be based off the emissions, okay? But if I put light intensity, what I can do is put a wiggle on the light, wiggle, and let's make it like 3 times a second and make it 25, like that. And then put the light at 80% so that it'll fluctuate between that and 100. And that will actually subtly influence how many particles are being produced per second. The other thing with the rocket is it didn't start right away. What I did with that is I just animated the particles per second. So I'll put it down to 0 here. I'm just going to press U on that layer. And then 1, 2, 3, and then put it to, we'll put it to 300. So it goes from 0 all of a sudden to 300. Now the next thing that I did was I changed a lot of the particle settings. Right now this is all fine for me. The velocity is fine. You can change the velocity. If you increase it, things will spray outwards more. If you decrease it, it'll stay more together, which I kind of like a little better, less outward motion. Now the next thing is actually the particle itself. And particle's life, put it to 5 seconds. And I'm going to change it to a cloudlet, because there's something I want to do in very particular here is as the rocket flies around, I want this to turn into this smoky, big, puffy cloud. What I'll also do is put up the opacity random just a bit, and then I want opacity over life, and I want it to go down. So I want it to start out really strong and then gradually fade to nothing. And then the coloring, well, let's do the size right now too. Size over life. We'll start small and then get big. So I want to go, let's actually go like this and just flip that. And you can just make it a little bit random or more random. There we go. So it starts like teensy weensy tiny and then gets big. But I don't want it to start that small. So we'll just start maybe a little higher and then get big like that. And then now we can increase the size a whole bunch because I actually want that to turn into smoke. Let's get this even a little smaller at the start. There we go. Maybe a little too small. You just need to experiment. That's the only thing. Just always experimenting. Maybe a little smaller in the start. Okay. Now what we have is this more cloudy, smoky thing happening. So also what I need to do is turn down some of the opacity a bit. It's too opaque. So there we go. I'm already getting some pretty decent looking smoke. Okay, and that smoke will just sort of sit there and fade away as my opacity goes down. The next thing I can do is I just want to add the slightest bit of gravity to it. Not too much, just a little. And then as far as air, just a little bit of spin. Because we did have wind with the snow, I did actually add some wind to this so that there's some drift caused by the wind. And that spin value is set too high. As you can see, it's breaking up my smoke a little too much. So I'll bring that to 10. And I'm not loving where it's emitting from, like what it looks like when it's emitting. So let's do the size over life. I might make it just a little bigger. Cloudlet feather, let's put the cloudlet feather up to 100. And maybe bring the size up a little more. And size random, put a little bit of size randomness. Oh, let's change also the color here. So we're going to go color. Let's go color over life. So we change this to be over life. So now what's going to happen is we're going to get this crazy color trail here, which we don't want. So I want it to start out. We'll end with it being more white. We'll start it out more of a yellow color, kind of like the yellowy fire color, maybe more of a white. And then move into kind of a reddish color, reddy orange color. Tuck that up a little bit more. And then kind of let's go really red here. And that'll be really close to the front here. So this is all happening very quickly, the actual object. And then we taper off to kind of a gray, maybe a whitish color. And that's got to happen fairly quick as well. I might get rid of this red. I don't like it. I'm going to just change that one. We'll change that to kind of a white, but almost a bluish white because I did this outside. So there's kind of a bluish color to it. And then this one, we'll just change to kind of a gray blue, more of a sky color. There we go. So now we have this smoke particle flying around, and it's sort of turning into sort of a smokish color while it flies. And maybe a little too much blue actually in there, so let's tone that down a bit. Okay, so now we have this thing flying around, which is great. I might increase the starting out size, so let's just go to the particle, size over life. Might want to just increase that a little bit. There we go. That'll look a little better. And then maybe bring down the size of the cloudlet a little bit. So it's just a little less overbearing. Well, let's see. Gotta find a balance where it looks good. And then reduce this. This is usually what takes the most amount of refining, I find, is to get the size values right. Okay, so now the next thing is the auxiliary system. Now the auxiliary, and that was just to add some little sparks and stuff like that. So let's go into the auxiliary system here. I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to put it to continuous. Now it starts out really insane and crazy looking. Keep the particles per second quite low because this will just really work on your system. Now, emit probability is sort of the likelihood of a secondary particle emitting. I'm going to put the velocity up a little bit so they sort of launch off of their particles because they're generated from existing particles, okay? And then I put streaklet because I wanted them more to be like little streaky sparks. Let's increase their velocity even more. Okay, so they shouldn't start until the actual thing starts. And now the actual size, you can bring the size up or down. It depends how well you want to see them. I want them to be really small because I want them to look like sparks. And size over life, I want it to go down. And opacity over life, I want it to go down. And color over life, which is ridiculous right now, looks like My Little Pony Land. I want that to be, I want it to start out yellow, well, a yellow-orange color, and then I want to sort of to fade off to an orangey color, a dark orange color. Okay, so then I just get these like a little bit of a sparkness happening, and I might have to just increase the size a little bit because they're not currently very visible. Okay, so there you go. You can see them. You can increase the lifespan. So let's just put life to 1. Particles per second. Let's put 10. It's too much actually. Emit probability. That's fine. Velocity is fine. I'm going to bring the size down. I just find them a little too large. I want them just to barely be there. And their lifespan is too long currently. So let's bring because right now the lifespan is a full second. We'll put it to 0.5. There you go. And I think one of the weird thing that's happening, I'm finding this like clumpiness up at the top a little bit annoying. Could be the size random that's doing that. And then the velocity random, that's not really a problem. Okay. Let's go size over life. Maybe I'll just really put this to a standard like that. See what that does. Too small. Oh. Okay. So let's go back to the auxiliary system. So the auxiliary system is a streaklet. It's happening over its life. Currently, they're not showing up really well. Let's go into half resolution mode to make sure I'm not missing anything. Let's enable some gravity on them so they fall. And I'm going to make them a little bit larger so that we can see them. And you may have to change it when you do your final render because you may find that they're too big when you go into HD mode and you just weren't seeing them. And I'm going to add some rotation to them. Transfer mode I'm going to put to add, which makes them even more visible. So then I can probably reduce the size back down again. There we go. And then physics, a little bit of wind effect would be good. And then randomness, you can add some randomness to them a little bit. Size, a little bit of randomness there. Color from main, you can have that happen just a bit if you want. I think that's about it. I think that's pretty much all I did with that. So it created this nice little sparking effect. Okay, so the next thing we'll do is just enable the lights. So I'm going to just put this stuff away, all here. It's not looking perfect, but it's something you really have to sort of play with. And I'm going to enable shading on. And I'm going to use Lux because Lux is actually a lot nicer looking than the other. And in this Lux, you can actually affect how the light is going to interact with the particles. And I want to put on some shadowlets. And shadowlets add some depth to the actual particles. I don't need them on the auxiliary settings, on the auxiliary. I think this all looks pretty good. Okay. So you can adjust how the shadowlet's going to look as well. And the other thing for this is you do need to have some kind of a light to light the scene then, which is why I put those lights in. So I had a slightish bluish light was sort of my sky light. And let's just adjust this a little. Too bright. And we could change this. This is, instead of an ambient, put a point light. And you can see that the smoke is actually interacting with that light quite nicely, actually. It tends to look really good. And especially for the amount of processing power it takes to do this, it's pretty impressive. Let's go in here. I'm just going to increase the light's intensity. Okay. And I have to sort of fight with the lux settings. Just trying to create a little bit of an ambient light underneath. And it's actually interacting real time with the light sources. So if your light sources are moving or anything like that, it will actually interact with those. On top of that, if you want to have a more sophisticated sparks system coming off of this, you can create another particle system. You can just duplicate the particle system and create another one. Because I find I'm not really loving the way this is emitting. The other thing is I feel like my emitter size is a little bit too big. 10, 10. I find it a little bit too large. Okay, anyways, I think you get the general idea. So this will actually add light to my little particle that's flying around. You can see that it's actually interacting with itself. So let's just take a more interesting segment here and preview that out. And actually, I'm just going to clear my cache really quick. You can actually see this interacting with its own light, which is pretty cool. You can see as it's going through itself, it's actually lighting itself here. I might even change the color of the emitter light. It's more of a yellow, fiery color. Just make it look a little more interesting. There we go. Awesome. Okay, so the other thing I just wanted to touch on really quick is if you don't want to use an auxiliary system, which is totally understandable because it tends to emit particles the whole time, you can just go aux system, and I would just turn this off. Okay, so what you can do is just duplicate this adjustment layer, which will give you 2 sets of particles, which can be a little bit crazy on the computer. So I'm going to put this down to 1/4. And then what I'll do with this second set of particles is I'm going to change it down to 50, put its velocity to 100, and then I'm going to change the particle type. I want to change it to a little streaklet. And its lifespan down to like 1 second, or we'll put it to 0.5. There we go. And its size over life, we'll just make it go smaller. We'll have it start out and then get smaller. Its actual size, bring it down to 5. Okay, and then its opacity over life. So opacity over life, we'll just go from full opacity down. Opacity random 0, opacity 100. Make it fully opaque. Maybe increase this to 100. As you can see, we're already getting some little streaks in there. Color over life, let's get rid of all this stuff. And we'll just pull this like that. And that'll give us nice little sparks coming off. And maybe increase the velocity even more so they shoot right out. And maybe increase the emitter size to 50, 50, and 50. And I think that's about it. We can just change this random seed a little bit if you want it to be. Make sure it's not lining up with the original particles. Not that you'd actually notice. As for shading, I'm not going to put any on this. So shadowlet off and shading off. So these will just be, because they're sort of bright and emitting their own light because they're sparks. So now we have 2 of them. So what I can do now is go into rendering. Transfer mode, I'm going to put that to add, so it'll sit nicely on top of the other particles. These particles, I'll go into their rendering mode. Transfer mode, we just go normal, because I don't want to lose the color of the shadows. So if I'm on something black, that works fine, but if I'm on something gray, I want to keep the shadows or the darkness happening from the light. Or if you're on a background image of some kind, you don't want to lose your shadows. So I'm just going to render this off really quick, and then we'll call it a wrap. Okay, so I've rendered out that particle. You can sort of see what's going on. It's not amazing. It obviously needs a little bit of work, but one of the keys with playing with particles is playing with things and adjusting them and manipulating with them. I reduced the velocity on those sparks and added some gravity, so they're kind of falling, but they don't look 100% great. So anyways, just play around, have fun, and experiment with these. I'll leave this particle setup in the example file of the project, and you can play with it and compare it to what I ended up doing with the other rocket file as well. So there you go. I think that's about it.
If you are interested to see how the rest of this bird was put together, make sure you check out the other Rocket-Dee tutorial videos. If you like what e.d.Films is doing and want to stay up to date on the latest developments and tutorials, please show your support by liking us on Facebook.